Welcome back to the Haunting Hour, the home where shadows whisper and the unseen lurks in every corner. If this video sends a shiver down your spine, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more chilling tales, and ring the bell to never miss an eerie episode. I'm eager to hear from you, so after the video, comment below to tell me which story you like the most and what haunting tales you'd like to hear next. Now, gather your courage because it's time to dive into the first story. Let's see if you can handle the haunting. It was a chilly November evening when my phone buzzed with a new delivery notification. The address was to a part of town I'd never been to before, somewhere on the fringes where the city's bright lights faded into dark, empty fields. The order was simple, a large pizza and some sodas, but the destination was anything but ordinary. Driving down the narrow, winding roads, my GPS struggled to keep up. The trees loomed overhead, their bare branches scratching at the sky like something out of a nightmare. Finally, I reached the place. It was an old house, sitting alone like it was hiding from the world. The paint was peeling, the garden overgrown, and the windows boarded up as if it hadn't seen life in years. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the car door. The silence around was thick, broken only by the soft whispers of the wind. Or so I thought. Gathering my courage, I grabbed the food and walked up the creaky steps to the front door. As I approached, I could hear faint whispers. They were too soft to make out any words, but they sounded like hushed, urgent conversations. There was no bell, so I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time, and called out, "Delivery!" Still, nothing. The whispers seemed to grow a bit louder, a bit closer, yet I couldn't tell where they were coming from. It was like the very air around me was speaking. Freaked out, I decided this was a prank or a mistake. I turned to leave, my heart pounding in my chest. As I walked back to my car, the whispers faded into the night. Relief washed over me as I saw the familiar comfort of my car. But as I reached for the door handle, I noticed something in the rearview mirror that made my blood run cold. There, in the back seat, was the silhouette of someone sitting. Someone I hadn't seen when I got out. My mind raced. Had they been there the whole time? Or had they slipped in when I was at the door? Slowly, I reached for the door. I cautiously opened the car door, my other hand inching towards my phone. I had to be smart about this. This wasn't just creepy, it was dangerous. The whispers might not have been the wind after all, and I needed to get out of here fast. With my heart hammering against my ribs, trying not to make any sudden movements that might provoke whoever was hiding in the back seat. My mind was racing with thoughts of every horror story I'd ever heard about lonely roads and hidden figures. "Who's there?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't respond but shifted slightly, a glint of light reflecting off their eyes in the dim interior. That was all the confirmation I needed. My survival instincts kicked in, and I slammed the door shut, locking it with shaking hands. I took a few steps back, phone in hand, ready to dial 911. But then the back door opened, and the figure stepped out into the moonlight. It was a man, disheveled and wild-looking, his eyes wide with what seemed like fear rather than malice. "Please don't leave me here," he pleaded in a hoarse whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "They'll hear you." Confusion warred with my fear. "Who will hear me?" I asked, my curiosity piqued despite the terror. "The whispers," he said, looking around nervously, as if expecting someone or something to emerge from the shadows. "They don't like visitors. You need to go. Now." I didn't need to be told twice. Tossing the still warm pizza bag into the passenger seat, I jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and started the engine. My hands trembled on the wheel, but I managed to maneuver the car around and speed away from that cursed house. As I drove, my mind whirled with unanswered questions. Who was that man? What was he doing in my car? And most importantly, what were those whispers he was so afraid of? I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, half expecting to see him running after the car, but there was nothing. Just the long, empty road and the dark silhouette of the house fading into the night. When I finally reached the brighter, busier streets of the city, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The normalcy of streetlights and late-night traffic calmed my nerves somewhat, but the echo of those eerie whispers lingered in my mind. I knew one thing for sure. I would never accept another delivery to that part of town again. Whatever secrets lay hidden in the whispers of that house, they were not meant for me to know. It was just another Thursday evening when I picked up the first order from Joey's Pizzeria, the aroma of pepperoni and garlic filling my car. I glanced at the delivery address on my phone, noting it was for an apartment at the end of town, a place I'd been to a couple of times before. The drive was uneventful, and I arrived at a slightly run-down building, the evening shadows making it look more forlorn than it probably was. I made my way to apartment 3C, balancing the pizza in one hand while I knocked on the door with the other. It creaked open slightly under the force of my knock, which was odd since I hadn't touched the knob. A sliver of light escaped through the gap, and a voice croaked from inside. "Just leave it on the floor, please." I complied, setting the pizza down carefully. As I turned to leave, the voice added, "Thank you, Tom. I've been waiting a long time for this." I froze for a second. How did he know my name? I shrugged it off, assuming maybe Joey's Pizzeria put names on the receipts now. Back in my car, the GPS pinged with another delivery notification. Oddly enough, it was for the same address, apartment 3C. A mistake, perhaps? I called my manager, who simply said, "Yeah, another order placed for the same spot. Just take it, Tom." By the time I returned, the previous pizza box was already outside the door, untouched. I knocked again, and the door was now slightly more ajar than before. A chill ran down my spine, but I pushed it aside, attributing it to the evening breeze. "Come in, Tom. Just set it on the table," the same raspy voice called out. Against my better judgment, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was dimly lit, with shadows dancing on the walls. I could just make out the outline of a figure in the corner of the room. "I can't stay," I stammered, placing the pizza on a nearby table. "But you'll be back, won't you?" "You always come back," the figure said, his tone oddly cheerful yet chilling. I hurried out, the door closing softly behind me. As I drove away, my phone beeped again. Another order. Same address. My heart pounded as I turned the car around, a sense of dread settling in. What was waiting for me at apartment 3C? And why did it feel like I couldn't escape? The night had deepened, and with each delivery, the door to apartment 3C was more open than the last. As I approached for the third time, a cold sweat broke over me. The door, now fully ajar, revealed the dark interior, like the mouth of some great beast waiting to swallow me whole. Hesitantly, I stepped inside once more, the smell of stale air and something faintly metallic filling my nostrils. "I knew you'd come back," the voice echoed from the depths of the apartment. It was clear now, almost as if the speaker was standing right next to me. "You always do, Tom." I swallowed hard, my voice barely a whisper. "Who are you? How do you know my name?" My eyes scanned the room, trying to locate the source of the voice in the dim light. The figure stepped into a sliver of moonlight, filtering through a cracked window. He was an older man, his face gaunt, eyes piercing. "Oh, I know a lot about you, Tom. I know about your late shifts, your struggle to pay rent, your sick mother. I've been watching for a while." A shiver of fear ran through me. How could he possibly know these things? I reached for the door, intending to leave, but his next words stopped me cold. "You can try to leave, but you'll come back. They always come back." Panic surged through me, and I bolted out of the apartment, slamming the door behind me. But as I reached my car, my phone pinged yet again. Another order. The same address. I stared at the screen in disbelief, my mind racing. Was this some sort of sick joke? Or something darker? Something I couldn't understand? I decided this would be the last time. I had to end this cycle. As I made my way back to the apartment, I noticed something different. The previous pizza boxes were stacked neatly outside the door, but a note was pinned to the topmost box. It read, "Come inside if you want answers, Tom." Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside, determined to confront whatever was waiting. The apartment was silent, the only sound my own ragged breathing. I found the old man sitting at a small table, a single candle casting eerie shadows across his face. "Sit down, Tom. It's time you knew the truth," he said, motioning to the chair opposite him. Reluctantly, I sat, my heart pounding in my chest. "What's going on? Why are you doing this?" The man's eyes locked onto mine, a sad smile playing on his lips. "This apartment, it's special. It has a way of pulling in the lonely, the desperate. It feeds on their fears, their desires. And I'm a part of it now, just as you are becoming." Confusion and horror mingled inside me. "I don't understand. Why me?" "Because you answered the call, Tom. You came back, again and again, and now you're part of the story. Part of the cycle. Like I am." As the truth sank in, a chilling realization dawned on me. I wasn't just delivering pizzas. I was delivering myself, piece by piece, into a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. And as the old man's laughter filled the room, the door swung shut with a final, ominous click. As the laughter of the old man echoed in the confined space, a sense of dread overwhelmed me. I was trapped, caught in a sinister cycle that fed on my fears. But amidst the terror, a spark of defiance ignited within me. I wasn't going to let this be my end. "I won't be part of this any longer," I declared, my voice stronger than I felt. The man's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. "You think you can just walk away?" he sneered, his voice a mixture of amusement and challenge. "No one walks away, Tom." "I will," I replied, standing up. My mind raced, searching for any solution. The door was closed, seemingly of its own volition, but I remembered something crucial. My phone, the device that had led me back here time and again. Quickly, I pulled it out and turned it off, cutting off the relentless orders that seemed to anchor me to this cursed place. The room grew colder, and the candle flickered violently, as if protesting my decision. The old man stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You think that will save you? You're already too deep in." Ignoring him, I moved towards the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. It felt ice cold, resisting at first, then turning under the pressure of my grasp. I pulled it open, the night air rushing in like a breath of freedom. The old man's voice rose in a furious howl behind me, but I didn't look back. I stepped out, the stacks of untouched pizza boxes a silent testament to the ordeal I had endured. As I crossed the threshold, the oppressive atmosphere of the apartment seemed to dissipate, like a nightmare fading at dawn. Outside, the world seemed unnaturally quiet, but beautifully real. I walked away from apartment 3C, each step lighter than the last. As I reached my car, I made a decision. I wouldn't be driving back to Joey's Pizzeria. Instead, I'd go home, embrace my mother, and tomorrow, I'd look for a new job. Something far away from deliveries. As I drove off, leaving the building and its dark windows behind, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. The old man was still trapped, part of that twisted place, but perhaps my escape would weaken its hold, make it harder for it to lure another unsuspecting soul. The night reclaimed the apartment as I disappeared into the distance, the echo of the old man's laughter, now just a memory. I had broken the cycle, but the fight to forget what I had experienced had just begun. It was a typical Friday night, and the city buzzed with energy as I navigated through the streets. Working as a food delivery driver for the past year had made me familiar with almost every corner and alley of this sprawling urban maze. Tonight's shift started off like any other, but little did I know it would leave me tangled in a mystery that still sends shivers down my spine. My phone pinged with a new delivery notification. Pizza to an apartment complex I knew well. I delivered there countless times, mostly to a friendly guy named Mark in apartment 24. As I scooped up the pizza from the local joint, the cook gave me a nod. "Busy night, huh?" I smiled in response, grabbed the pizza, and headed out. The apartment complex was a towering old structure with dimly lit hallways that always smelled faintly of pine and dust. I buzzed apartment 24, and after a brief pause, the door buzzed open. The hallways were quieter than usual, an eerie silence filling the space where there was typically the sound of televisions or chatter. I knocked on Mark's door. "Delivery!" I called out. The door swung open, but it wasn't Mark who greeted me. Instead, a woman I'd never seen before stood there. She was pale, with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through me. "Thanks," she muttered, taking the pizza without offering a smile. Something about her felt off, but I shrugged it off as just another odd customer. "Enjoy your meal," I said, trying to sound cheerful. She nodded slightly, her gaze lingering on me a moment too long before she shut the door. A chill ran through me as I walked back to the elevator. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. As I drove back to the restaurant, my thoughts were interrupted by a news alert on the radio. Local man reported missing under mysterious circumstances. The reporter didn't mention a name, but a sense of dread washed over me. I pushed the thought away, telling myself it was just another coincidence in a big city. But that night, after I returned home and scrolled through social media, the same story popped up again. This time with a photo. It was Mark, the regular guy I delivered pizzas to, and he was the one reported missing. The post said he had disappeared right after receiving a delivery earlier that evening. My heart sank. I had just been there. I had just seen that strange woman in his apartment. The questions began to multiply in my head. Who was that woman? What happened to Mark? I realized I was possibly the last person to see him before he vanished. The weight of the situation settled in, and I knew I couldn't just ignore it. I had to find out what was going on. The next morning, I couldn't shake off the eerie feelings from last night. My mind kept replaying the moment the door swung open and that strange, pale woman appeared. I had to go back. I had to find out what happened to Mark. After my morning shift, I drove to the apartment complex, my stomach nodding with every mile closer. The building seemed even more ominous in the daylight, shadows casting long, dark lines across its faded brick facade. I hesitated outside, my hand hovering over the buzzer for apartment 24. I took a deep breath and pressed it. No response. I pressed again, more insistently. Still nothing. It was as if the apartment had swallowed up its inhabitants and now lay dormant. Not knowing what else to do, I began knocking on neighboring doors. Most didn't answer, but finally, an older lady in 26 peeked out. Her eyes were wary, but softened slightly when I explained I was looking for Mark. "Oh, Mark, such a nice young man, always so polite. But I haven't seen him since yesterday. Quite unusual," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And you say there was a woman? Strange, he never mentioned anyone." I thanked her and walked down the hall, each step echoing off the walls, filling the silence. The atmosphere felt charged, like the calm before a storm. On a whim, I tried the door to 24. To my shock, it creaked open. It wasn't locked. The apartment was shrouded in shadows, sunlight barely filtering through the drawn curtains. Mark's things were all there, his laptop on the table, a book laid open on the couch, a half-empty coffee mug. It looked like any normal day, except for the palpable absence of life. I stepped inside, my heart racing. "Hello?" My voice sounded foreign in the stillness. No answer. I walked through the living room and noticed a photo on the wall, a picture of Mark with the same woman who opened the door last night. They looked close, her arm looped through his. My mind raced. She was connected to him, but how? Then I saw it. On the coffee table, among the scattered magazines and remotes, was a note written in hasty scribble. It read, "If you find this, I haven't left by choice. I need help." It was signed by Mark. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Mark knew something was going to happen. He knew he was in danger. I quickly took a picture of the note with my phone. Just as I pocketed my phone, a noise startled me. A floorboard creaking behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. The air felt heavier, as if charged with unspoken words. I left the apartment as quietly as I had entered, closing the door gently behind me. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Who was the woman? What had happened to Mark? And most importantly, how could I help him? As I reached the ground floor, I decided to visit the building's security office. Maybe they had seen something on the cameras. Maybe they could tell me more about the woman. I needed answers, and I needed them now. My resolve hardened. I couldn't let this go. Mark's silent plea for help echoed in my ears, and I knew I wouldn't stop until I found him. The security office felt like a bunker, buried deep within the building's bowels. As the guard pulled up the footage from the previous evening, the grainy images flickered across the screen. There I was, delivering the pizza, then exiting the frame. Shortly after, the mysterious woman appeared, darting out of the apartment with an anxious glance over her shoulder. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice tight with concern. The guard shrugged, his face lined with fatigue. "No idea. But she seems out of place here." He switched to a camera that covered the parking lot. We watched as the woman briskly walked toward a beat-up sedan. "You could check there," he suggested, pointing to the screen. "That car's been parked there a while." The air in the parking garage was heavy with the smell of oil and stale air. I cautiously approached the sedan the security guard had pointed out. The car seemed untouched by time, a relic in the dim light. Inside, the back seat was cluttered with personal items. A man's jacket, a book, and even a photograph. My heart skipped a beat when I recognized Mark and the woman from the apartment in the photo, smiling as though they shared a secret. Beneath the seat, a piece of paper caught my eye. It was a hastily scrawled note. "Help me. She's keeping me prisoner. Look at the Green Lake cabin." The handwriting was shaky, desperate. I felt a chill as I realized this was from Mark. With the note in hand, I drove to the old Green Lake cabin, a place known for its seclusion. The cabin was hidden by dense trees, its once vibrant paint now peeling under the relentless watch of the woods. As I approached, the door creaked ominously in the wind. Inside, the air was musty, the only light provided by the setting sun piercing through cracks in the boarded-up windows. I called out, "Mark!" No response. My heart pounded as I searched, the silence suffocating. Then, from a small, locked room at the back of the cabin, I heard a faint, muffled sound. "Help!" came a weak voice from behind the door. I broke the lock with a heavy piece of wood and swung the door open. There, tied to a chair, was Mark. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. "Thank you," he gasped as I hurried to untie him. Before we could leave, footsteps echoed from the front of the cabin. It was her, the woman from the apartment. Her eyes were wild, her demeanor frantic. "You can't take him from me!" she screamed, her voice unhinged. Ignoring her protests, I dialed 911. Within minutes, the sound of sirens pierced the quiet forest air. The police arrived quickly, apprehending her as she tried to flee. They found evidence of her obsession with Mark, from countless photos to letters she had written to herself from him. As the police led her away, Mark, though weak and shaken, managed a small smile. "I owe you my life," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. She was my ex. Things ended badly, and she couldn't let go. I never thought she'd go this far. As we stepped out of the dark confines of the cabin into the fading light, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The mystery was solved, and Mark was safe. But more than that, I had changed. I wasn't just a delivery driver anymore. Tonight, I was someone's hero. And as we walked toward the waiting ambulance, the setting sun cast long shadows behind us, symbolizing the darkness we were leaving behind. It was a typical Friday evening when I pulled up my delivery app to check my route for the night. My name's Alex, and delivering food helps me pay for college. That night, my route was lined up along Willow Street, a quaint, dimly lit road with old brick houses that always gave off a spooky vibe after sunset. As I approached the first house, I noticed something odd. There was a live feed camera right above the doorbell, which wasn't unusual by itself, but the screen next to it displayed a still image from a previous delivery I made, maybe a week ago. Weird, I thought, but shrugged it off as some high-tech security feature. At the second house, the same thing happened. Only this time, the image displayed was from the first house I just visited. It showed me handing over the food, but my face was blurred out in a way that looked intentionally creepy. My heart started to race a little. What kind of security system was this? By the third delivery, I was uneasy. Each house on Willow Street had this eerie setup, and with each stop, the images grew more disturbing. This time, the screen showed me from the second house, but my eyes in the image were replaced with dark, empty sockets. It looked like something out of a horror movie. I tried to convince myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe some tech-savvy prankster was messing with the footage for a laugh. Still, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was very wrong. I decided to make one last delivery on Willow Street and then call it a night. As I walked up to the final house, my hands trembled slightly. I rang the bell, and my gaze was drawn to the monitor. The image from the previous house stared back at me. Only this time, it wasn't just altered. It was threatening. The picture showed me with a look of terror, and behind me stood a shadowy figure, its hand on my shoulder. Panicking, I dropped the food bag and backed away from the door. I had to find out what was going on. Was someone watching me? Manipulating these images to scare me? I needed answers, and I knew just where to start looking. Determined to uncover the truth, I stormed back to the first house I delivered to earlier that night. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a hacker, a stalker, or something even more sinister? The street was eerily quiet, with only the rustling of the autumn leaves breaking the silence. As I approached the house, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the delivery app. Customer complaint received. Please contact support immediately. My heart sank. This night was turning into a nightmare. I reached the first house and hesitated before the door, staring at the live feed camera. Taking a deep breath, I rang the bell. A middle-aged woman opened the door, confusion evident on her face. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking puzzled. "Hi, I'm Alex, your delivery person from earlier. I noticed something strange with your security camera. Did you see the images on your monitor?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "Oh, the Halloween decorations? We set them up to scare the trick-or-treaters. Just some fun with old footage and a bit of editing software," she explained, but her tone didn't convince me. "Halloween decorations?" I echoed, feeling a mix of relief and suspicion. But why use images of me? And from tonight, I pressed further. She shrugged, looking slightly uncomfortable. "I guess my son must have added new images. He's into all that tech stuff. I really don't know what he's been up to. I'm sorry if it scared you." Not fully reassured, I thanked her and left, my thoughts swirling. Was it really just a prank? It seemed far too coordinated and targeted. I decided to visit the last house I had delivered to, the one with the most disturbing image. As I walked, the chill of the night seemed to seep into my bones. When I reached the final house, I paused. The street was too quiet, and a faint light flickered from the camera monitor. Bracing myself, I approached the door. This time, when I rang the bell, there was a long pause. The door finally creaked open, revealing a young man in his 20s, his expression unreadable. "You again? What's wrong?" he asked, his voice cool. "I saw the images on your camera. They were edited to look threatening." "Why? Who's doing this?" I demanded, my fear turning to anger. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I'm sorry. It was supposed to be a joke. My friends and I thought it'd be funny to create a horror-themed experience for the delivery people. We didn't mean to scare you that badly." "A joke?" I was incredulous. "Do you realize how terrifying it is? This isn't funny. It's disturbing." He looked genuinely remorseful. "I'm really sorry. We took it too far. I can show you how we did it, if that helps." Reluctantly, I agreed, needing to see for myself. He led me inside to a small, cluttered room filled with computer screens and editing software. As he demonstrated how they manipulated the footage, I realized how easy it was to turn an ordinary delivery night into a scene from a horror movie. As he talked, however, a realization dawned on me. If it was all just a prank, why did my delivery app send a complaint about me? Something still didn't add up. I decided I needed to dig deeper and find out who really sent that complaint and why. The night wasn't over yet, and I felt that the worst was yet to come. Leaving the last house, My mind was a tumult of thoughts and emotions. The explanation of a prank didn't sit right with me. There was an underlying malice to it all that seemed too intense for just a joke among friends. The complaint on my app was the loose thread I needed to pull. I dialed the customer support number and waited, pacing under the sparse streetlights of Willow Street. "Hello, Alex speaking. I received a notification about a customer complaint. Can you tell me more about it?" I asked the moment the support rep answered. After a brief hold, the representative returned. "Yes, Alex. The complaint was logged from an address on Willow Street. But it's odd. There's no specific detail. It just mentioned immediate attention required. Can you tell me which house it was from?" My voice was firm, more out of necessity to know than any real calm. "It was from 47 Willow Street, the last address on your delivery list tonight," the rep replied. But that was the house where the young man had shown me the editing software, where he confessed to the prank. With my suspicions now flaming into certainty, I thanked the rep and hung up. I needed to confront him again, this time to get the whole truth. As I approached the house for the second time that night, I noticed the flickering screen was now ominously dark. I rang the bell, my heart pounding in my chest. The door swung open quicker this time, the young man's face showing surprise and then concern. "Alex, what's wrong?" "You look upset," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "I know about the complaint from this house. Why did you log it? What are you trying to do?" I demanded, skipping all pretenses. He sighed, his posture slumping. "I didn't think you'd find out. It was supposed to be part of the scare, the final touch to make you really freak out. It wasn't just a prank. We were filming your reactions for a social media challenge. It was supposed to be funny, to see how delivery drivers handle horror scenarios." I felt a mixture of anger and violation. "You used me, my fear, for likes and shares, without my consent?" He nodded, remorse etched across his features. "I'm sorry, Alex. I realize now how wrong it was. We deleted all the footage after seeing how scared you were. It wasn't right. The apology was a small comfort, but it didn't undo the night's trauma. You need to make sure nothing like this happens again. To anyone," I said sternly. "I promise, we've learned our lesson. It was stupid, and it went too far," he assured me. I left the house feeling a complex mix of relief and residual fear. The night had started as just another shift, but it turned into a lesson on the darker side of human nature. As I drove away from Willow Street, the flickering shadows seemed less menacing, knowing the truth behind them. But the experience left a mark, a reminder of how quickly things can turn sinister under the guise of entertainment. From that night on, I decided to approach each delivery with a bit more caution, a bit more awareness that behind every door, the unexpected awaits. It was just past midnight when I decided to order some food. Finals week had me glued to my books, and I hadn't eaten a proper meal all day. The night was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that makes every little sound seem loud. When the food finally arrived, I was so absorbed in my studies that I barely noticed the knocking at first. The first knock was soft, almost hesitant. I figured it was the delivery guy, so I grabbed my wallet and headed to the door. Peering through the peephole, I saw no one. Puzzled, I opened the door to find my food lying on the doorstep. Still warm, but not a soul in sight. "Weird," I muttered to myself, shrugging it off as the delivery person being in a rush. I brought the food inside and continued studying, but just as I settled down, the knocking started again. This time it was louder, more insistent. I rushed to the door, my heart starting to race. Again, nothing. No one was there. The empty hallway of my apartment building echoed back at me, adding to the eeriness of the night. Trying to calm my nerves, I told myself it was just some kids playing pranks. I went back to my books, but the seed of unease was already planted. Little did I know, it was just the beginning, and the mystery of the midnight knocking was about to deepen. The next night, wrapped in the safety of my apartment, I tried to dismiss the previous evening's events as just a fluke. My stomach, however, had other plans and grumbled for attention. Despite my hesitation, I found myself tapping through the food delivery app again. I ordered, half hoping the knocking would not return, yet the curiosity was gnawing at me. Like clockwork, as the digital clock struck 12:03 a.m., the knocking resumed. This time, I approached the door slowly, my breath caught in my throat. Peering out, the hallway was again empty, bathed in the flickering light of the aging fluorescent bulbs. The food parcel sat innocently outside my door. My hands trembled slightly as I brought the package inside. Determined to uncover the source of the knocks, I decided to wait by the door after grabbing my food. The minutes ticked by, each second stretching longer than the last. Just as I was about to give up, the knocking echoed again. Sharp, quick knocks that seemed to vibrate through the air. I flung the door open immediately, but again there was nothing. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. The silence seemed almost mocking. Frustrated and a bit frightened, I leaned out, listening for any sign of movement. That's when I heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible, coming from down the hall. The words were indistinct, but the chilling tone was unmistakable. Rushing back inside, I locked the door and backed away, heart hammering in my chest. This can't be happening, I whispered to myself. The night no longer felt safe, and the unexplained events were quickly transforming my home into a place of unease. As I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling, the fear settled deep within me. I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. Tomorrow I would have to do something, anything, to understand what was happening. But as sleep finally claimed me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Determined to confront whatever was haunting my nights, I devised a plan. The next evening, I set up my phone to record video aimed at the doorway. I hoped to catch on camera whoever, or whatever, was responsible for the knocking. As the sky darkened and the clock neared midnight, my anxiety peaked, but I was ready. Once more, the familiar pattern played out. At 12:03 a.m., the knock started, sharp and clear. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob, then swung it open. Again, nothing greeted me but the empty, quiet hallway. I retrieved the food, set it inside, and quickly checked my phone. The video was still recording, capturing everything. I sat down to review the footage, my heart pounding as I scrolled to the part where the knocking began. The video showed the hallway, as I had seen it, desolate, with flickering lights that cast eerie shadows. But then, as I watched, a chill ran down my spine. Right before each series of knocks, a shadow passed swiftly by my door. It was too quick to make out any features, more like a blur, but it was unmistakably there. I replayed the segment several times, trying to understand what I was seeing. Each review sent a fresh wave of goosebumps across my skin. The realization dawned on me that this was no ordinary prankster. Something unnatural was at play. Armed with my unsettling evidence, I decided to seek help. The next morning, I contacted the building manager and showed him the footage. His face paled as he watched, and he admitted that other tenants had reported similar experiences. He promised to look into it, suggesting perhaps it was time to bring in some outside help. That night, the knocking didn't come. Whether it was the presence of other people investigating or something else, the silence was a relief. However, the mystery of the late-night visitor never fully resolved. Despite inquiries and even a few late-night vigils by the residents, no explanation surfaced. The incidents gradually stopped, and life returned to normal, but the shadow in the video and the knocks that echoed in the night remained an unresolved whisper in our minds. As I moved on from that apartment a few months later, the fear and curiosity stayed with me. The experience left me with more questions than answers, forever altering how I perceived the quiet of the night. It was just another regular Thursday night, or so I thought. As someone who often ordered takeout after long days at work, the sound of the doorbell usually signaled the arrival of my dinner, and nothing more. But tonight was different. The air felt heavier, the night darker. When I swung the door open, a young guy, probably in his early 20s, stood there holding a bag of food. But it wasn't his presence that caught me off guard. It was his eyes. They darted around nervously, like he was being watched. With a shaky voice, he asked, "Hey, could I come in for a sec? I really need to talk about something important. It's kind of urgent." Reluctantly, I stepped aside to let him in, curiosity mingling with a growing sense of unease. He walked in, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone or something to be following him. Once inside, he set the food down on the table, but made no move to leave. His behavior was odd right from the start. He paced back and forth, mumbling to himself about being followed and needing to hide. The more he talked, the less sense he made. I couldn't tell if this was a prank or if he was genuinely in trouble. As minutes ticked by, the tension in the room thickened. His eyes never settled, always flitting to the windows, the doors, any slight sound from outside making him twitch. I tried to ask him what was wrong, who was after him, but his answers were cryptic. Just when I thought things couldn't get weirder, he stopped pacing, turned to me with a look of sheer terror, and whispered, "They're here." He pointed towards the window with a trembling hand. I looked but saw nothing. That's when the lights flickered, and the real fear began. The flickering of the lights sent a chill down my spine. Every shadow seemed to move just at the edge of my vision, but whenever I turned to look, there was nothing. The delivery guy, now huddled in the corner of my living room, kept whispering frantically, "We need to be quiet. They can't find us here." I had no idea who they were, but his terror was infectious. The silence that followed the flickering lights was suffocating, broken only by our shallow breaths. Every creak and groan of the house made my heart jump. I wanted to believe this was just a misunderstanding or a bad joke, but the fear in his eyes was too real. Trying to maintain some semblance of calm, I asked him again, "Who is after you? What is going on?" He looked at me, eyes wide with fear, and said, "I can't tell you much. If I do, it might put you in danger too. They don't like it when I talk about them." His cryptic words were frustrating, but before I could press further, we heard a soft tap against the window. I nearly screamed, but he clasped his hand over my mouth, shaking his head with wide-eyed urgency. Peeking through the curtains, I saw nothing but the dark, empty street. Yet, the sense that we were being watched was overwhelming. Suddenly the room grew cold, and an eerie whisper filled the air, echoing around us. It was impossible to tell where it came from or what it said, but it sounded like a warning, or a threat. The delivery guy crawled to the window, his movements cautious as he peeked outside. "There's something you need to see," he whispered, beckoning me over. With hesitant steps, I joined him by the window. He pointed to a shadow across the street. It looked human, but distorted, as if flickering like the lights had earlier. As we watched, it seemed to notice our gaze and vanished. Panic set in then. "What are they?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "They're watchers," he replied. "They keep track of certain things. I accidentally saw something I shouldn't have. Now, I think they're after anyone who interacts with me too." The implications of his words were terrifying. Was I now in danger too, just because I opened my door to him? As we pulled away from the window, the light stabilized, and for a brief moment we hoped it was over. But then a loud knock at the door shattered the fragile peace, freezing us in place. The knocking grew louder, more urgent. The knocking grew louder, echoing through the tense silence of my house like thunder. The delivery guy and I exchanged a glance full of fear and uncertainty. "Don't answer it," he hissed, his eyes wide with panic. But the knocking persisted, more insistent with each passing moment. With my heart pounding in my chest, I edged toward the door, driven by a mix of fear and an overwhelming need to know. The delivery guy grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Please, you don't understand. It's not safe," he pleaded. Ignoring his warnings, I pulled away gently and peered through the peephole. There was nobody there. Confused and slightly relieved, I turned back to him, about to speak when the knocking started again, this time from the back door. It was as if whatever was out there was toying with us, circling, finding new ways to terrify us. We rushed to the back, the same scene greeting us. No one was there. As we stood in the dimly lit kitchen, the air around us grew inexplicably cold, and the whispers returned, louder this time, almost coherent. "Leave," they hissed, a simple command that chilled me to the bone. The delivery guy seemed to crumble, his face falling into his hands. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "I thought I could hide, that I could escape if I just kept moving. But they don't forget, and they don't forgive." I was about to ask more when the lights flickered violently, plunging the house into darkness. In the pitch black, I heard him scramble towards the front door. The sound of it opening brought a gust of cold air, and then as quickly as it had started, everything stopped. The lights flickered back on, and I was alone. I ran to the door, but he was gone, vanished into the night as if he had never been there. The street was empty, no sign of the shadows or the mysterious watchers he had spoken of. The next few days passed in a blur of paranoia and fear. I jumped at every sound, every knock a reminder of that night. But there was nothing, no sign that the watchers were still interested in me. Had they followed him? Or had his presence marked me too? It wasn't until a week later that I got my answer. A package arrived. No return address, just a small box placed at my doorstep. Inside was a note written in a hurried, scrawled hand. It read, "Keep moving. Keep silent. Keep safe. Thank you for your kindness, but forget me now for your own good." Tucked beneath the note was a small, odd-looking device, its purpose unclear. The message was cryptic, but the meaning clear. This was far from over. His visit had drawn me into something bigger, something darker than I could have imagined. The shadows, the watchers, they were real, and now I knew too much. As I pocketed the device, I realized that my quiet, ordinary life was gone. I had to prepare, to watch, to listen. Because when you're being hunted, survival is everything. Thank you for joining me tonight on The Haunting Hour. If these stories sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps me bring more chilling tales straight to your screen. If you're not yet part of our ghostly gathering, click subscribe and ring the bell to not miss out on any of our haunted adventures. And I'm curious, which story tonight creeped you out the most? Drop a comment below to let us know. Your favorite stories fuel our dark fires and inspire more spooky tales. Also, what kind of scary stories do you want to hear next? Tell me in the comments. Your wish might just become our next nightmare. Until next time, keep the lights on and keep the spirits at bay. Good night, and remember, never venture alone into the dark.